turnout tonight. I'm really happy to see you all. If you don't know me, you may not. My name is Sarah Topikian. I'm the outreach staff member here at St. Andrews. I've been in a few roles, but now I'm in outreach. And I am so pleased to welcome Lauren Weinhold here from Jewish Vocational Service. She's the Chief External Affairs Officer, so it's really amazing that she would come tonight to give us her presentation. She'll be talking a lot about the work of JVS and more than that, the modern refugee experience, which I think really shapes a lot of their work, is just what people are going through. So I'm excited to hear about that. We got connected with JVS because we, a few years ago, started a collection to support Afghan refugees. I know that was in the news a lot, and we really wanted to support. We did not end up working with the church we thought we would work with, so we still had funds left over, and we really wanted to find a good use for those funds. So I reached out to JVS. I met Lauren. I was so impressed. I got Susan involved. We went, we toured. We were so impressed. And I'm really happy to say that we brought $13,500 to JVS, a check that was given by all the people of St. Andrews who contributed originally, and that money was matched dollar for dollar before the end of the year. So that's $27,000 of support we were able to offer. Before we get started, I would like us to just get centered for a moment, and I just want to tell a little bit about how I think about all of this. So I often share with people who know me well that my grandfather was born a refugee in Armenia. He had quite a life and ended up coming through Ellis Island at a pretty young age. And something I find myself reflecting on a lot is what he must have been thinking as a child on this journey, and what he must have been thinking as a new American on his journey, and what his hopes for the future might have been, and what his hopes for his descendants might have been. And there are days that I just think, for example, I'm driving this check over to this refugee organization that has a comma in it, that I am a dream of his sort of embodied. And that's just so touching to me. So as Lauren gives this presentation, I would hope that when we're looking at the statistics and we're seeing the numbers, we're thinking that all of those numbers are individuals with hopes and dreams and humanity. And just to be really grounded that that money that we gave is having such an impact for a safe, secure future for someone in our city. So I will stop and give it to Lauren, but I hope you'll help me welcome her.
So on my ear. Okay, how's that? Does that work? Okay. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. Sarah, your heartfelt and awesome introduction makes me feel like I just went to church. So, amen, and let's go home. No. And as Sarah mentioned, you all, over the years, have been incredibly generous with your time, your talent, and your resources, and that was doubled last week. So on behalf of the, is that me? Am I clicking? Do you hear? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, good. Nope. How about that? Yeah. Okay, yay. Good. I won't move. We'll just stay right here. On behalf of the thousands of individuals that we serve and walk alongside every year, I can assure you that your generous gift, it was one of the largest that we received at the end of this year, will help and support hundreds of individuals. So thank you so much from everybody at JVS, a heartfelt thank you. When Sarah called what was that, maybe 3 months ago now, that in our work is hard. It is hard work, but it is heart work. And I always look for, in every day a cup fill moment, because it's so easy for our cups to be depleted in our service. And when I got off the phone with Sarah, my cup was overflowing. And then when she brought Susan, my cup was even more overflowing. And I'm going to try to get through this evening without shedding tears of joy and appreciation. So thank you to you all. And it's a joy to be with you this evening. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Lauren. I don't really care about titles so much, but all that my title means is that I get to do all of our storytelling. So I work with our fundraising team, I work with our volunteer team, and I get to oversee some of our marketing and outreach. And it is super special for me tonight, 4 days into the new year, to get to share with you all, for the very first time publicly, that 2024 is our 75th anniversary. We were founded in 1949 after World War II. The Kansas City Jewish community rallied support for and welcomed thousands of Holocaust survivors, global World War II veterans, and other displaced persons after the war. And 75 years later, that work continues. We welcome and walk alongside, as I mentioned earlier, thousands of individuals. This last year, 2023, I think we touched 6,500 individuals in Kansas City. And so tonight, what I want to do, first of all, how many of you are even peripherally familiar with JVS? Okay, great, good. 14 months ago, I would have been among you that didn't have your hands up. So I appreciate those of you in the room that know a little bit about us, and I hope tonight you'll leave with maybe some answers, but hopefully even more curiosity about our work and an interest in getting engaged in whatever way is meaningful to you. So our mission is to engage, encourage, and empower newcomers and their families to achieve successful social, cultural, and economic integration. I talked to you about our history. Our value statement is that we believe in thriving communities are strengthened by diversity. So we work to fulfill that every day. While we are not officially a religious organization, although we have Jewish in our name, I think if you were to poll all 90 of our staff, they would tell you that in their own unique ways, we are all living out a tenet of the Jewish faith known as tikkun olam, to heal the world. And so we're all doing that in our myriad of ways. I get to do that by being with you all tonight. Sometimes that means picking somebody up from the airport. Sometimes that means sitting with a family member at the hospital. So tikkun olam, to heal the world. And thank you for being a part of that. Just to do a little level setting, because I think if you watch the news, it's easy to be overwhelmed and confused by all of the terminology that is sometimes used correctly and sometimes not used correctly. So I thought we'd do a little level setting tonight so that you maybe have a clearer picture the next time you watch the news. If we think about immigration writ large as an umbrella, the spokes of that umbrella are comprised of different legal statuses. So refugee, asylum seeker, migrant, visa holder, etc. Humanitarian parolee is one of those. At JVS, we work with all the folks in all the spokes. So it doesn't matter what anyone's status is. We welcomed a young woman this past spring who showed up at our door randomly. She was from Nigeria. She had somehow by herself made it to Brazil. And then she somehow made it from Brazil up through the southern border. And she asked somebody inside the southern border, now that she's in the United States, where should she go? And that person, who I want to hug, said, you shouldn't stay here, but you should definitely go to the middle of the country. It's known as the Midwest. And specifically, there's this city called Kansas City, Missouri. And you should go there. And she did. by herself. And I don't want to think about the harrowing journey that she was on, but she made it to Kansas City, and by the time she made it to our door, she'd been on the streets for a couple of weeks. So we immediately got her shelter and safety and health services and all the things to get her onto a path to wholeness. So we'll work with folks who come in off the street. We also work with legally defined refugees. And so who is a refugee? What is a refugee? The term refugee was made in 1951 by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, as someone who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of their nationality, that's an important distinction, and is unable to, or owing to such fear, is willing to avail themselves of the protections of that country. So that's who a refugee is. And for the purposes of our conversation tonight, I'm going to focus on refugees. I welcome any questions you have about any of those other spokes, and we'll talk about them a little bit, but for the purposes of tonight, I really want to focus on the majority of our work that's centered around refugee resettlement. So, a refugee, again, a person who has left their country of origin. So someone who lives in Tanzania, who leaves their community and moves to another community in Tanzania is not a refugee. They are a migrant within their own country. A person who leaves the Democratic Republic of Congo and goes to Tanzania is then a refugee, someone who applies for the legal, has left their country of origin and applies with the United Nations to become a legal refugee. So their journey is much more involved than these three steps, but this is a great overview. So they've left their home, they've gone to a secondary country, and this is sometimes many years. We'll talk about those sometimes many years in just a minute. And then the final leg of that journey is to be resettled into their new home. I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at you tonight. This is a 2022 statistic. So it's arguably higher than this today. But as of the time of this report, there are 35.3 million refugees globally. That I'm a visual person, and so that is somewhere between the entire population of Australia and the entire population of Canada. We'll throw some more statistics at you. Less than 1% of that 35.3 ever make it to a third country. Less than 1% of 35.3 million. So globally, there are far more refugees living in camps and in dire situations than are ever coming to Canada, Australia, the United States, etc. I want to focus on the third line here. Resettlement in the United States in 2021. The U.S. welcomed 11,000 refugees. In 2022, we, as a country, welcomed 25,000. In 2023, the final number isn't out yet, but it's somewhere around 67,500. And the federal government has indicated that their goal for 2024 in the United States is 125,000. I will tell you that the goal since 2021 has been 125,000. So the ceiling has not gone up. The number of refugees that the country has been able to resettle has slowly. And I am traditionally an optimistic person, but I'm also a realist. I think getting to 125,000 this year is probably a long shot. We're probably going to be somewhere in the 90 to 100,000 range, if I was to try to guess. Then let's focus on this last bullet. When I was talking about the for so many years, for quite a few years, the average amount of time that a refugee is in that secondary situation, whether that's a camp or it can even be in an urban setting, which is not necessarily any better. The average length of time that a refugee is displaced before, in our case coming to America, is around 17 years. I have colleagues at JVS who were born in refugee camps, whose parents are from Burma, and she was born in Thailand, and she's never been to Burma, and she is not technically Burmese. And when a refugee is born in a camp or even in an urban setting, they are not a citizen of that country. They are stateless, technically homeless. So that colleague that I was just mentioning, she is now an American, and she claims that proudly. But 17 years. So there are a couple of options throughout that journey. I think it is, I have not been a refugee, and so I don't want to speak as if I am, but I can imagine that many refugees ultimately have a desire to return to home. Who wouldn't? If you left the home that you love, the home that you were born in, you left all of your earthly belongings there, it would be natural to want to return there. The reality of that is slim to none. That rarely happens. And as we think about modern day populations, Sarah was mentioning the Afghan population. I think if you were to, again, poll the 700 or so Afghans that are in Kansas City, they would tell you that while they want to go home, they know they will never go home to Afghanistan. But I think if you were to poll the Ukrainians that Kansas City has welcomed, there is a strong desire and a hope that they can someday return home. So repatriation is I think top of mind for lots of refugees. Certainly then in that secondary country, because again, remember, less than 1% ever make it to that third country. So a majority of folks are living in that local integration. They become integrated in the community that they have fled to. And then a very small percentage make it to a third country. This is really small print, and I won't belabor all of it, but for the United States, if someone is in a refugee camp and says, I want to move, I want to become a citizen of the United States, then the State Department works with that person or family and runs through an 11-point screening process. So these are health examinations, these are security clearances, these are medical screenings, and the average amount of time that this process alone takes is 18 months to 3 years. So none of this is quick. I don't know about you, but I get frustrated if I have to sit at a red light for too long. So I can't imagine living in a refugee camp for around 17 years and then having to go through this process for up to 3. The important thing to note about this process is that, let's say a family of 4 is in a refugee camp and they begin this process. And then halfway through, they're at step 6, halfway through, they have another child. They have a third child. They start all over, because their family dynamic has changed. They're not the same family that they were when they started. Or if you and your spouse are applying and you are in separate interview rooms, and the question is, when were you married? And one of you says, we were married on March 20th of 1989. And your spouse says, we were married on, I can't remember the exact date, was it March 21st? I think it was March 21st. You're automatically kicked back to the beginning because that represents, in the United States' mind, in the State Department's mind, a security risk. So to say that this is an easy process would be a gross misrepresentation. It's kind of hard to read, but I find it fascinating. So I was talking about that 125,000, that ceiling. So the presidential administration sets an annual admittance ceiling. As I said, this year it's 125,000. It has been 125,000 since 2021. So that represents the blue line on the chart. The orange line is how many we actually welcomed into the United States. So you can see that there's some interesting trends here. This was a significant Bosnian influx. And then round about 2001, that ceiling went almost to the lowest point it had, and our actual admittance went even lower because of 9/11. Yeah, that. And so it kind of mainlined for a while and slowly crept back up. And then you'll see, and I need to say this too, none of my comments tonight are intended to be at all political. It is entirely factual. So the previous administration lowered the ceiling and put in place several bans, travel bans for specific populations. And so that ceiling tanked, as did the number that we actually resettled. You'll see then it went way back up, but the orange line kept going down. Why is that? Because the previous administration was not refugee and immigrant friendly. Much of the infrastructure to have State Department officials in refugee camps to be able to process applications and things, that infrastructure was dismantled. And so the current administration has been rebuilding, and that's been that slow increase that we talked about in one of those earlier slides, where it was 11,000 and then 25,000 and then last year 67,000. So it's creeping back up. I don't have a 2023 or 2024 number, but it would be going back up slowly. So, any questions about that real quick? Okay. So, locally, what does that look like for JVS? Those were some national numbers. What does that look like for us? So I was just talking about the previous administration. In 2021, we welcomed a total of 109 individuals. And in 2020, I think from 2016 to 2020, we welcomed a total of 120 individuals over 4 years. We being JVS. We being our organization. So in 21, we were at 109. If our chart went back further, you'd see probably 40, 30, and so on. You can see in 2022, we jumped, I'm sorry, my laptop is right in the way, but that says 523. And you'll see that a majority of that, as Sarah was mentioning, were our Afghan brothers and sisters. And then this past year, we're on the federal fiscal year, and so our fiscal year ended September 30th. As of September 30th, we had welcomed 409 individuals. We are on track this year to welcome over 600. So we're creeping back up too. Largest population that we are seeing currently is the Congolese community, but certainly pretty equal representation among Iraq, Somalia, Syria, and then some Southern American countries. Questions?
Are you able, since you have such a long timeline between the start of the process and then the resettlement process, do you get a glance years in advance to understand where the people are coming from? Does that impact how you prepare services?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So every year we work with the city of Kansas City, and we work with the U.S. government. And we let the federal government know, in consultation with the mayor and other community partners, what once we determine what our bandwidth is to accept, we let the federal government know. And that is determined by language expertise that we have. I think currently at JVS, we have 37 languages represented. So pretty extensive, but also our capacity to handle certain medical cases, certain educational cases. So we let the federal government know that, and then the federal government says, that's great, and here's who we're really going to send you. So we that's adorable, and here's who we're really going to send you. And you would think, Mike, that with all of that lead time, that we would know who's coming and when. We get about 2 or 3 months out, we get a listing of who we can expect over the next couple of months. But that doesn't mean that they're coming right away. They're still in that process. They're getting close, but they're still in that process. The federal government, if they are being generous, might give us 2 weeks notice. On Tuesday of this week, we were notified that today we had 2 families of 6 coming. So we had 12 newcomers coming, and we had 2 days notice. We had 48 hours notice. So it's a pretty quick turnaround, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But just because it takes 20 years doesn't mean that we necessarily have the same lead time. Yeah.
Thank you. Did any of these groups have significant populations from their own countries here in the community?
Yeah.
And then the second part of that question, how does that factor in how and where you play?
So
Even the people that you see.
it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. The short answer to your first question is absolutely. There are significant populations already here. We have a significant Congolese community in the historic Northeast. The Afghan community has been slowly migrating north of the river to North Kansas City. There's a significant Syrian community in Grandview. So there are pockets. When we are securing housing for families, their country of origin does determine where we try to place those folks, because we don't want to. We would not want to put a Congolese family in Grandview, where they don't know the language, share the culture, blah blah blah. That said, I don't know if you've heard, there's a little bit of an affordable housing crisis nationwide. And so a majority of the families that we do resettle initially, we have tried to resettle in the historic Northeast because the bus line up there is the most reliable, and that's loose, but it's the most reliable. And there are some schools up there, some elementary and high schools, that are uniquely equipped to work with refugee and immigrant populations. And so, and it is an incredibly culturally diverse part of town. If you've not spent much time in the historic Northeast, I highly recommend it. There's some great restaurants and stores. Go to the Afghan market and get some samosas. It's an amazing experience. So there are pockets, but we try initially to resettle as many folks as we can up in the historic Northeast. That's becoming increasingly more challenging because it's a saturated area. There's not much available housing, and then certainly we can talk for days about what defines affordable. And we'll talk about why affordable is important to us in just a minute. Yeah.
This is, what are the boundaries of the historic Northeast? I'm sorry. The boundaries of the historic, I don't know where that is.
So, let's see. 71 on the west side to essentially 435 on the east side, from I'm trying to think of the southern. essentially like, Truman is probably a good, it's a good southern border, if you will, and then the river. Yeah, it's a vast area. It's a big area. Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody that because we have people watching online, they can't hear us if we don't use our microphones. So if you're going to ask a question or say something, please pick up your mic and or raise your hand, and either Jen or I will bring it to you. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, Don.
Yeah, I noticed in the slide before, at least 5 of those line items are from South American or Middle America, but the numbers are extremely small. And when we think migrants here in Kansas City, we think about the southern border and all the migrants who want in. Why are they not represented?
It's a great question, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify. These numbers represent legally defined refugees. So these are not migrants from the southern border. These are, they might live below the southern border, but their legal status is refugee. It is not asylum seeker or migrant.
But aren't there a number of potential migrants on the southern border who are trying to get in legally?
Absolutely.
Well, why are
Absolutely.
they not represented then?
They are, because their status is not, you have to apply to receive refugee status. The folks that we often hear about and see on the news at the southern border would be considered migrants and or asylum seekers. And we work with those populations. They're just not represented. Back when I was starting, I said we worked with around 6,500 individuals. That includes this 409, but it also includes around 170 unaccompanied minors and around 700 Cuban Haitians. So we are seeing those populations. They're not represented here because this is just one of the spokes of that umbrella. Does that make sense? Okay. It's a great question. So when a refugee comes to the United States, before they arrive, we know they're coming. Sometimes we have 2 days notice, sometimes we have 10. We secure housing for them. We pick them up at the airport, and then the next morning, we begin their path to wholeness by offering extensive community integration program, workforce development, and health and wellness. We're going to talk about all of these areas. So these are the sorts of services that we offer to refugees when they arrive. We set up their home. We enroll them in public assistance benefits. They're immediately enrolled, they're automatically enrolled in Medicare, or Medicaid, sorry. And we enroll them in school, kiddos in school. I say all the time, it's always back to school season at JVS. So we help them find employment, secure employment. We help folks learn how to ride the bus, which is important. And then we do a series of community orientation classes, and those classes focus on health and hygiene, safety, personal finances, employment, how to change a light bulb, and what is a parent-teacher conference, So all of those things that you and I do every day that we don't even think about, those are all new concepts to a newly arrived refugee family. So we spend a good deal of time helping integrate them. So we utilize volunteers for housing setups. This is a really narrow, precarious stairway, and it looks like there's a really large flat screen television that's being hoisted up that. I'm going to assume it made it up to the top. Everyone made it to the top in one piece. And different house, but this is one of the families waving from their new front porch. So when folks arrive, we pick them up at the airport with a welcome sign, and we hand them the key to their new home. And when they open the door to their home and turn on the light switch, there's a warm, culturally appropriate meal waiting for them there. Federal government lets us know, and we get what's called biodata on them, so we know what nationality they are. We know the makeup of the family. Average family size that we're seeing these days is anywhere from 6 to 8. It's rare to see individuals. It's even rarer to see small families of 2 or 3. It's most common that we see really large families.
And you said unaccompanied minors as well.
Unaccompanied minors, yeah. And so we try with our unaccompanied minors, and again, all those spokes. We work with all of those spokes. The services that we are federally equipped to offer differ based on someone's status. So an unaccompanied minor, for instance, receives different services than a refugee family, than an asylum family might receive, etc. So, as I mentioned, folks are enrolled in public benefits. It is not uncommon for cases to arrive with significant health issues. That's one of the triggers or things that will move a family up in that extensive process, is if somebody's got a significant underlying health issue, hypertension, diabetes, series of strokes, etc. That moves them up in the queue, and so it is not uncommon when a family arrives, they go straight to the emergency room to receive the care that they're needing. We certainly offer school support. Up in the historic Northeast, there is the Global Academy and the Welcome Center. The Global Academy is a great school because it allows for newly arrived refugee students to spend part of the day learning in their native language and the other part learning in English. So they'll spend the first part of their day at the Global Academy, and they'll study in Swahili or whatever their language of origin is, and then they'll go to their regular school for the second half of the day, where they'll learn English and continue their schooling. Certainly we do training and job placement, and then there's the community orientation. I want to back up and tell you why all of these things are important. We say all the time that the families that we see, the individuals that we see, they have mastered the surviving part, clearly, right? They've mastered that. For us, that is not good enough, because you and I are doing more than surviving most days. So
You say that mastered that, not always in a legal manner?
You know what, I'm not gonna, I don't wanna make that assumption, because the refugees that we see do. I mean, they are following a legal channel, because if they're not following that legal channel, they're kicked out. So they've mastered the surviving, the tenacity, the grit. They know how to be resilient. But for us, that's not good enough. We want to move families from surviving to thriving. So, and so does the federal government. So the federal government mandates that a newly arrived refugee family should be fully self-sufficient. So that means having a job, knowing a language, being able to get to and from work, being able to support yourselves, should be fully self-sufficient within 90 days of arrival. 3 months. 3 months. So we recognize, so there's a sense of urgency that we have as a federal subcontractor to make sure that happens. So I was mentioning, the morning after a family arrives, we're going to their home, we're picking them up, we're bringing them back to JVS, and we're beginning the school enrollment, benefits enrollment, the job seeking. We're starting all of that immediately, because we don't want to be the reason that a family isn't reaching full self-sufficiency. We also recognize that 3 months is not realistic. For some individuals it is, but for a majority it is not. And so we do have some funding, some federal and some not, that allows us to provide added financial support to families who are, they may have a job, but maybe it's paying below minimum wage, or they're having significant health issues that's keeping them from being able to secure a job. We have support, both federal and non, to be able to help walk alongside families for up to 8 months. So it gives us a little bit more time to help them reach that sufficient self-sufficiency.
So can I assume that after 90 days, the federal government stops providing funds and it has to be a private venture? Okay.
Yeah. And speaking of funding, we can talk about what each refugee receives from the federal government when they arrive. If a refugee family of 4 arrives in Kansas City, each person, regardless of age, each refugee is assigned $1,075. And that is to last them for 90 days. Right? So again, if you're a family of 4, you've got $4,200, $4,300 to last you those first 3 months. And we are required, as a federal subcontractor, we are required to automatically deduct from that $4,300 anything that we have spent to resettle that family. For instance, rent. That culturally appropriate warm meal, we don't do that just because we're nice people. We are nice people. And I want to believe that we would do that anyway, but we're mandated to do that. We are mandated to provide a certain type of housing that has to meet certain criteria. And so back to that affordable housing struggle, the more money we're paying for someone's rent, the less money they have to last them to buy groceries or school supplies or clothing or whatever. And so we rely heavily on the support of the community. So that $27,000 that you all just invested in JVS, guess how that's going to get used? We're going to be supporting families in their initial resettlement to again move them from surviving to thriving. There you go. Also another fun fact about finances. That refugee family of 4, if they're coming from the Congo, they arrive in Kansas City, they've probably stopped in, maybe they had a stop in Europe somewhere, and then they stopped in Chicago, and then they made it to Kansas City. So a long, laborious journey, and not inexpensive. The federal government it mandates that family has 5 years to repay the federal government for the cost of their airfare to come to America. And that may seem like, oh, that's horrible. And it's on its face, we can argue whether it is or not, but essentially those funds then are used to replenish the coffers so that more families can continue to come. So it's not that the federal government is necessarily being greedy, but they're trying to renew the pipeline to be able to bring additional people to Kansas City. So again, I tell you all of these things to just make you stop if you're listening to the news or you're reading the newspaper and you hear something about refugees. Now you're able to kind of critically look at that information and go, that's interesting. That's different than what my new friend Lauren told me, and I'm going to investigate that. Where's your microphone? Microphone.
Is it financially realistic?
She's like, I've technically got the microphone.
Give it to me.
I'm trying to talk into it.
Is it financially realistic that a family who probably is not making significant amount of money to pay off air flight for 4 people within 5 years?
If they work with JVS, we're going to move them there.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, we're dealing with human beings here. So of course, there are going to be individuals who don't pay their rent. And what happens to you or I if we don't pay our rent? We get evicted. That does happen. We don't want that to happen, and we try to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. But these are human beings, just like you and I. I think an important tenet of our work too, the only choice that a newly arrived refugee family doesn't get to make for themselves is their first home, their first dwelling, because we have to do that before they arrive. And we have really unique, special, and important relationships with landlords, because we're asking landlords to write a 12-month lease for a family that isn't here, that doesn't have a job. You can't do a credit check on. They don't have a credit history. They don't speak the language, and landlord is not putting the lease in our name. They're putting it in the name of the family. And so if a family decides at month 4 or 5 that they don't think they should have to pay rent, and they choose not to pay rent, that is their choice. And so are the consequences of that choice. And so we want all of our clients, all of our refugee families, to have full autonomy and ownership of their decisions. So where the kids go to school, where the parents end up working, what they do in their free time, how they handle their medical issues. We want all of that to be their choice. And that can be ominous, because if you've grown up in a refugee camp, you haven't gotten to make any decisions at all. Every decision has been made for you. And so the concept of and the responsibility of having to make those choices can be daunting. And so our job is to walk alongside folks and present the options. Here are the options you have, and here are the consequences of those options. But ultimately, it's a family's choice. So our community orientation classes. So I wanted to switch gears just a little bit and talk about our consumer services department. So we have a full immigration department. I'm really proud to say that in 2023, we received funding to hire our very first immigration attorney, on-staff immigration attorney, and we now have a paralegal with her as well. And a majority of the work that she and our immigration team have been doing in 2023 was around processing asylum applications for our Afghan brothers and sisters. And so I want to talk about our Afghan friends, since that was initially how you all got connected with us. So in 2021, Kansas City welcomed around 700 or so individuals from Afghanistan. At JVS, we resettled around 400 of them. We had 10 days notice that 400 people were coming. That is not enough time to secure housing. And so we did have to put those hundreds of folks in an extended stay hotel up north of the river, but our staff stayed there too. Our executive director lived at the extended stay hotel along with our new neighbors. So we were able to get those families into housing over about a month or so. Their status, we're talking about spokes in that umbrella. The legal status of Ukrainians who have arrived since the war, and the Afghans who left when the U.S. evacuated, their legal status is humanitarian parolee, which is an awful, obviously no one in marketing came up with that name because it's not at all awesome. But they have what is called TPS, temporary protected status. That temporary protected status lasts for 2 years. So folks came in November of 21. Round about summer of 2023, we started getting real nervous because the U.S. government had not indicated that they were going to extend that TPS. They since have for another 2 years. What will happen because we do not anticipate that TPS will be extended again, should that temporary protected status expire before an Afghan person has received an approved asylum application, then that Afghan person loses their work authorization. And so they're here with, again, no hope of being able to return home, but no prospect to be able to support themselves or their families here. And so you may have heard in the news about a legislative bill called the Afghan Adjustment Act. We do a fair amount of advocacy work around that. We had hoped it was in an omnibus package, and then it was in the National Defense Act package. At the end of 2023, it got pulled out for a variety of reasons. I'm not optimistic. Washington can't seem to do much these days, and so I'm not optimistic that our Afghan brothers and sisters are high on the priority list, but they should be. Because again, if their temporary status expires and they don't have an approved asylum application, they lose their work authorization. The Afghan Adjustment Act would provide a permanent path to citizenship, and it would also provide a pathway for their family members who are still in Afghanistan to come and join them in the United States. I have 4 Afghan colleagues at JVS, and if you'll allow me, I'd love to tell you a little bit about them. Qasim was an award-winning journalist in Afghanistan embedded with U.S. troops. He works in our immigration department now, and he has started, KCUR has invited him to be a contributing writer for them, and so if you see Qasim's name, that's him. That's him, and I'm delighted to call him not only a colleague but a dear friend. He's incredible. His wife is in Pakistan. His mother, sister, and some cousins and majority of his nieces and nephews are in Afghanistan, and it is not safe for them there. Momin was a high-ranking official in the Afghan military. He studied at the International Officers College at Fort Leavenworth in 2016 and 2017. And so he spent a lot of time in this part of the country. So when he was able to evacuate, he knew immediately where he wanted to come in the United States. And because he was in the military, his family lived on base in Kabul, and so he was able to bring his wife and 4 kids here. And they live up north of the river, and Momin is the head of our workforce development team, so he helps newly arrived folks secure employment. Sabawoon was an interpreter embedded with U.S. troops. He also works on our workforce development team. He was married to the love of his life, his wife, in the morning, some August morning, and he was on a plane out of Kabul in the afternoon without her. She is in Afghanistan, and it is not safe. So we would love to be able to bring his wife here. And then Hashmat was also an interpreter. He's one of our case managers, and his wife and first child are still in Afghanistan. His first child was born months after he came to Kansas City, so he's never met his now 2-year-old child. So as Sarah was saying earlier, when you see numbers and statistics, I implore upon you, and I reiterate what Sarah said, there are people connected to those numbers. The Afghan community is not just a community of numbers, it's a community of really talented, smart, dedicated individuals who have more love for America in their left pinky than I do in my whole body. 2 Veterans Days ago, so not this past Veterans Day, but the Veterans Day before, Qasim was invited to speak at Veterans Day festivities at the World War I Museum. And he got up and gave he preached for 5 minutes about how much he loves America and how proud he is to live in America and how every person in that auditorium should love America. And it was so heartwarming because before he got up to speak, the auditorium was full of veterans, including my husband, but sitting in front of us, in the row in front of us, were some Vietnam veterans. And you could tell they were doing the whole, who's that guy? What's he doing? Why is he here? What's he gonna, what's his story? They were the first ones to give him a standing ovation when he finished. So again, there are people associated with all of these numbers. Thank you for letting me digress and go on a little bit of a tangent. Immigration. So we have a full, back to the slide, we have a full immigration team, and our immigration team works with anyone needing immigration services, whether that's if you want to change of status, if you want to bring your family here, if you need to apply for asylum. Our immigration team is fully staffed and does that. It is a fee-based service. However, for what an outside immigration attorney would charge, we charge maybe a tenth of that, and we certainly work with families to work out payment. We're concerned about serving them, less concerned about the money part of it. Language and cultural services. So this year, 2023, we launched an English for Citizenship curriculum. So individuals who are on a path to naturalization and are getting ready to take the exam, but need to brush up on their English, they do so by using the curriculum, the naturalization curriculum, as their study guide. And so that's a fabulous course. And then we have a certified community interpreter training. So for folks in the community like you or I, if you speak a second language and you want to become a certified interpreter, we offer a course to help you become certified. And then our interpretation and translation services, I told you, I think on staff, we have about 37 languages represented. We work with the school district. We work with the city of Kansas City. We work with other nonprofit agencies and health centers to provide interpretation and translation services. And then this is my favorite slide. This is the economic impact that refugees and immigrants, so now I'm talking about everybody in that umbrella here in Kansas City. There are upwards of 150,000 immigrants and refugees in Kansas City who contribute $1.3 billion in tax revenue, and then an untold amount more in spending. Of that 150,000, 11,000 of those folks are entrepreneurs. They own businesses, they have restaurants, and refugees and immigrants are 48% more likely to start a business than you or I, which I find fascinating. And then this last bullet, I want to just kind of close with this. Remember at the beginning of our time together, I was telling you about the young woman from Nigeria who was told to come to Kansas City. This is why. Kansas City has a reputation for being a welcoming city. That is different than, and I don't want to confuse the two, that's different than a sanctuary city. So that's not what we're talking about. Being a welcoming city is a certification that we are currently applying for that would demonstrate that we have the economic infrastructure, the workforce infrastructure, the transportation, schooling, language access, all of the things that make Kansas City a place where our new families can not survive but yeah, awesome. And as a part of that accreditation, Mayor Lucas formed back in October the Mayor's Commission for New Americans. JVS has a seat at that table, and it's comprised of I think maybe 6 or 8 organizations and individuals who will be working with the city and with the chamber to address any of the issues that would keep us from becoming a welcoming city. So, for instance, everybody talks about how unreliable the mass transit system is in Kansas City. That's one of the things that the commission is going to be taking on and dealing with. If there are other barriers to someone being able to thrive here, the commission's going to address that. And I think we submit the application to become a welcoming city next month. So send all your good vibes and prayers. It's a laborious process. We've been working on it for over a year. And it's a 5-star rating, and I think you basically have to be like the Garden of Eden to be 5. I think we're aiming for maybe 2 or 3 initially, with the hope of moving up. So you all are a part of us being able to call ourselves a welcoming city. So thank you for the ways. You don't even know how you are affecting the lives of our newcomers, but every time you smile at somebody that doesn't look like you in the grocery store, every time you don't get irritated because the person in front of you in the line is speaking another language, you're part of being that welcoming city. And so again, on behalf of the thousands of individuals that we serve, our board, our staff, I thank you. And I will just tell you about our staff. We are ramping up for that 125,000. About 18 months ago, we were, right before I joined JVS, our staff size was about 45. Right now, we're almost at 100. So we've almost doubled in size. We've outgrown our space, so that means we've had to extend into some satellite locations. So ultimately, we would love to find a location that's in closer proximity to the families we resettle, which would be in the historic Northeast. But if any of you know of any places that could accommodate 90 staff, a warehouse, and maybe have some affordable housing to go along with it, that would be, I'd be happy to buy you lunch. Absolutely. Yes, I am not above that. And so, and our staff, I'm proud to say that about 40% of our staff are former clients or individuals who identify as refugees. So that speaks volumes, I think, to the quality of our care, because former clients want to work at JVS for one of 2 reasons. Either they had a really positive experience and they want others to have that same positive experience, or they had a challenging experience and they want to be a part of fixing that for somebody else. Either way, it is a humbling honor to get to work alongside those individuals every day. We have a general board of directors, but we also have a young professionals board. And you all, I don't know if you knew this, but you have a young professionals board member in your midst. Sarah is one of our new young professional board members. So Sarah's stuck with us, and I'm just so excited to get to work more with Sarah this year, and hopefully you all. At the back table, I have left a couple of things. If you'd like more information, if you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter, and we send out events and national updates, local updates on all these things. If you want to join our mailing list, feel free to provide your information. If you're interested in volunteering, and that can be a one-time thing, or it can be more long-term, or it can be a really deep dive where we match you with a family for 6 months. If you have a passion and an interest, I guarantee we can find a way to utilize it at JVS. Also, we're getting ready for our first big snow of the season, and so it feels appropriate to tell you that we are constantly in need of not only household items, but winter wear. Many of our clients come from those warm weather countries, and so we had individuals in August asking for winter coats because it was already getting to be too cold for them. And when families are arriving, they're coming in flip-flops and a sarong. And so if we can take a coat to the airport, they're all the better for it. So if you're cleaning out your closet, please think of JVS. We would be honored to utilize your your items. Any questions? I've thrown a ton of information at you. Any questions? Get your microphone. I don't want Susan to yell at you. Get your microphone.
Turn it on.
There you go. Turn it on. Yep.
2 questions.
Yeah.
What happens to the children, unaccompanied children, when they come to JVS?
Oftentimes there is there's an extended family or a sponsor here.
They don't go in the foster system?
No.
Okay.
No, we'll if we're seeing an unaccompanied minor, they have a U.S. tie here.
Okay.
Yeah, whether that's a family member or an acquaintance of some kind. Yeah.
And the other thing, I'm assuming many of these people or neighbors have post-traumatic stress disease.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Does JVS help that, or do they go to a psychologist, which they don't take money? I mean, they don't take insurance.
It's a great question. Yes, we have a full health social work team, and so we do intensive case management. Because you're exactly right. It would be uncommon for someone to not come with trauma. Absolutely. And that can be anything from I'm in love with your dog. Your dog. I want to take if your dog goes missing, it's because it's in my car. I want to take your dog home. But if one of our clients was here, they would be deathly afraid of your pup. So it can be something as seemingly innocuous as that, or it can be some people you physically can't be touched. You know, it's too traumatic to even touch them. So yes, we have a full social work team and great community health partners in Children's Mercy, University Health, and Samuel Rogers. Yeah.
I have a question for the audience.
Good.
How many of you have a family member or a loved one who was a refugee? 1, 2. No more than 3 generations back. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wow.
That's pretty good. There you go. It's interesting. I didn't mention this earlier when I was reading the legal definition of a refugee. You might have noticed, because it wasn't on anyone's mind in 1951. Climate is not included in the legal definition, and so currently, a person fleeing their country for climate issues is not eligible for refugee status. I anticipate that in my lifetime that will change. Well, there's that, but yeah, we can have cocktails and talk about the climate too. But I would anticipate that probably within my lifetime, which isn't. We've only got a few more decades to get it done. I would imagine that climate refugees will become a legal status as well. You've asked some remarkable questions. I hope, though, that you leave with some questions and you leave with some curiosity. Not that you're going to go home and Google all of this, but I hope that hope you know maybe a little bit more than when you got here tonight, and that it might inform how you watch the news and how you have conversations with your friends and family. I remind my friends and my family all the time when unkind comments are made about the umbrella. I remind folks, rather than disliking or hating the refugee, dislike the country that caused them to be a refugee. So the journey, that 17 to 20 year journey that folks are on, is never anyone's first choice. No one is sitting around in the Congo and saying, you know what, what are you doing next week? Let's pack up all of our earthly belongings that we can carry on our back, and let's walk to Tanzania, and then let's spend a couple of decades in a refugee camp in the hopes that we might do better somewhere. No one is choosing that as their first path. And so, again, the desperation, but the tenacity, the grit, the resilience, the patience that our clients share with us is remarkable. And I wish I had a tenth of it in my body. I would invite any of you, anytime Susan and Sarah know that our door is always open, come anytime. We'd love to give you a tour, introduce you to some of our staff. You could meet some clients, see where the magic happens. It is a magical place, and it is magical because of all of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, one more.
I'm just recommending a book that I read. It's Beekeeper of Aleppo, and it describes a family who and a individual child on his journey to become a refugee status. So please, it's an awesome book.
There's also a movie that it came out a couple of years ago called The Swimmers. It's about two Syrian sisters. Isn't that good? Yeah, who are swimmers, and they leave Syria, they leave their family behind, they leave Syria in hopes of making it to Europe so that they could swim in the Olympics, and they do. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. The middle of the movie's the best part. So we didn't give any of that away. I'll hang around afterwards, so please don't hesitate. I'd love to visit further. My card is back there. And then also, you are all our partners in crime now. I invite you to take a little globe with you. This is seed paper. So take it home, tear it up, and plant it in your kitchen window. And when the wildflowers grow, you can be reminded of the refugees and immigrants that you have helped welcome. So thank you.